When you load GameMaker, you should see a menu that looks like this. If you are in simple mode, you're going to want to switch to advanced mode. You'll know you're in advanced mode because you'll get these options down here: sprites, sounds, backgrounds, paths, scripts, fonts, timelines, objects, and rooms. And if you're in simple mode, you'll only get sprites, sounds, backgrounds, fonts, I think, objects, and rooms. So you'll have a limited palette down here if you're in simple mode. So you will want to change into advanced mode. Now, the first thing we're going to do is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but when you're developing a piece of software, a game especially, you're not going to worry about what it looks like. You're actually going to worry about the functionality of it. And that's really important, because if you start to worry about the sprites and the backgrounds now, there's the potential to take a long time on that, and then you're probably going to need to change them when you actually program it anyway. So what we're going to start with is just some very simple sprites, because we do need sprites in GameMaker, but we're going to start with creating a room. So if you right click on the room and click create room, or you can click on this button up here, you'll get a room. Now this room has got some properties to it. We've got all these tabs along the top here, and I might just make them a little bit wider so that we can see them. We've got objects, and currently we've got no objects in our game, so we can't actually select any to put in the room. Then we've got the room settings. It's a good idea to give this a room name, so I'm going to call RM test room. And I'm going to use what's called camel case for this. Now this isn't a big deal, but you want to make sure that you're consistent. So if you name everything with capitals, continue to name them with capitals. I'm going to use a little precursor here, so RM and underscore tells me it's a room, and then test room is going to start with a little t and a big R. So the first word is going to start with a little letter, the rest are going to start with capitals. I could do underscore, lowercase r, I could just do test room like that. It doesn't matter, as long as you're consistent. And then I'm going to give it a width. So this is the actual width that is going to display on the computer screen afterwards. And just for a test room, 640 by 480 is fine, and we'll leave that as it is. Then we go to tiles. Now, once we create some backgrounds, we'll be able to use tiles to lay out our level, so we'll look at that later on. Same with backgrounds. You might want to change the background color in here, because the gray is a bit ugly to start with, but I'm just going to pick a random color here. I'll go with a dark blue or teal. And there's some other options down the bottom here which we'll look at when we get up to that part. I want to focus on the programming more rather than what it actually looks like. And then we've got views, which we'll look at later on. So what we've got so far is a very basic room. Notice at the top here that mine says snap 16 by 16. If yours is 32 by 32, you can leave it at that. I might change it to 32 by 32 actually. And I'll click tick. So now I've got a test room. When I click play, it's going to save my executable. It's going to run. And there I've got that working. Okay, so this here is my game at the moment, and there's not much to it, but I can see that it's working. And I'll close that down and go back to here. So now we're going to add in a sprite. This is just going to be a very basic sprite. I'm going to create a sprite. I'm going to call it SPR test block, and this is just going to be a block that the player can will stop the player from moving out of bounds. And I want to click edit sprite. Now this bit here is a sprite editor, and later on we will go over this in more detail, but all we need to do right now is create a sprite with this button here, 32 by 32, so whatever I set it up as before. And then it says here image 0. I'm going to double click on that, and up in this top left corner I'm just going to fill it with a brush. So what I've done here is I've just used the paint bucket to fill this block with a color, whichever block you want. Make it something that's going to stand out from your background. I'm going to use red. Click that tick. And then we've got our image. Click that tick. And we don't really need to change anything else here. That's all fine. And just click OK. Then I'm going to create another sprite. This is going to be SPR test player. And I'm going to edit this sprite. Create a new sprite, 32 by 32 can be fine, and I'm just going to make this a different color. I'll make this yellow. Alright, so I've got two blocks here. One of them is going to be used as a wall block or some kind of block to stop the player from moving out of bounds. The other one is going to be used for the controlling the player. Now, in order to actually use those sprites, because they're just sprites, they're just little bits of graphic, I'm going to need to create an object. So I'm going to create an object, and this one is going to be called obj_test_wall. Now notice that I'm preceding everything with what type it is, obj in this case, or SPR up here. And I've already broken my consistency by using capitals everywhere, so I'll continue to do that. And here I'm going to select a sprite, so test block. And it's going to be solid. I don't want the player to be able to move through it. And then I'll click OK. It doesn't actually have any events. I don't need to worry about this stuff over here for now. So it's going to be a test wall. Now I'm going to go into my room again. And you'll see here I've got an object. I'll just make this a bit bigger. I've got an object that I can start to place in my room. Now there's a few little tricks to this, and they're down the bottom here if you get stuck. But left mouse button is add. If you hold down Alt, it'll let you put it anywhere. It won't just snap it to the screen, but we don't actually want that. I'm going to right click. Shift lets you place multiple ones, so you just hold down Shift and drag and it'll let you place multiple. And Control will let you move one that you've already placed. So I'm just going to make a boundary for this room. Then I'm going to add in some other blocks here, like this. It doesn't have to all look like that. Make a thing here. We just want to be able to test and right click will delete. Right click and shift, you can just kind of drag and it will continue to delete. And right click and control will bring up a little pop-up menu on that particular option. So you can lock it and do different things with it. You probably won't need to worry too much about that though. So I've designed a room, I click the tick button, I click play, it will save an executable, and then it will run this room for me here. Okay, so there's nothing that I can do at the moment, there's no interaction, but I've got a room that works with a test block in it. So let's actually build up our first object that the player can interact with. So this is going to be called obj player, or maybe test player, because it's just a testing object. And then pick that sprite for it. It's not going to be solid, and we're going to add an event. These events here occur at different times. So this create event occurs when the character is created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, make sure that when it's created, it's aligned to the grid. So that will mean that I'll demonstrate what this does. It's aligned to the grid. The grid is 32 by 32. And click OK. So I'll go back and I'll go into here. And now I've got my other object. I can select either of them by clicking in this area. I'm just going to use the Alt key to place him right there. Not where he should be. He's kind of stuck in the wall here. But when I hit play and run it, you see it aligns it to the grid. So that's the first thing that it does. If there's any kind of mistake, it's going to align him to the grid. Now this is not always necessary, depending on what type of game you're going to do. So I'm just going to go through some different kinds of player control schemes. So this one here, align to the grid. And then we're going to add an event. What's going to happen when the player pushes the left key? So add event left key. Add event right key. Add event up key. Add event down key. So when the player goes left, I'm going to make him go left, and I can give it a speed of 4. When the player moves up, click on up, drag the move in here, click the up arrow, they're going to go up at a speed of 4. When they push the right key, they're going to go right at a speed of 4. And when I push the down key, they're going to go down at a speed of 4. So I can run this now. And push down, up, left, right. It's not working too well, mainly because there's no collision detection there. He's getting stuck in the walls, or he's just moving through them. So what we need to do now is go back into here, into our object test player, add another event. What's going to happen when he collides with that wall? What I want him to do is stop. So that's the middle button there in this move fixed area. It's stop. And I'll click OK. Click OK. Run this. First thing will happen, he'll get aligned to the grid. Move up. Oh, he's hit the wall, he stops. Now there's another problem here, is that it's very hard to actually go down one of these bits because I need to hit down arrow at the exact moment that he passes by it. And as soon as I push left, it stops because it's trying to move right now, except there's a wall there, so he stops. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a conditional statement that checks. Now this is a kind of grid-based movement. Now if I was to go in here and just quickly edit this sprite and go File, New, maybe 16 by 16. So I actually made him smaller, and I'll fill this with yellow. So I actually made him smaller. And what I can do, or what I can do with this, is I've now got it can move around the maze quite freely. I don't have to worry about being too exact. The only problem is that it doesn't actually stop. But that's not a problem at the moment. So I can move around quite freely if he's smaller. So that might be some kind of control scheme that you're looking for, some kind of dungeon crawl where you move around using a top-down character. And then, pushing spacebar, he might shoot in the direction that he's facing. That's up to you. We'll go back in here and I'll put this back to 32 by 32. Transform, resize canvas, 200. Oops, I'll have to fill that again. Now what I want to do is making sure that every time I push left, he's only going to start trying to move in that direction if he's already aligned to the grid. And that might sound a little bit weird, but if I just open up my room, if the player is here, he is going to be aligned to the grid. So if I'm pushing right, he will go right, even if he's going up. And so if he's moving down, and he's moving down the screen, oops. He's moving down the screen here, forgive that, and he gets to here and I'm still pushing down, or he's going to keep moving down. But say if I push right now, he's not actually aligned to the grid, so it's going to ignore that until he is, and then when he gets there, he'll try and move right and he'll stop. But if he's here and I push right, he's not aligned to the grid, so he's not going to receive that command, and he's going to go down, and if I'm pushing right when he's here and he is aligned to the grid, then he'll turn right. So to see this in action, let's just put him there. What I'm going to do is go to the Control tab on the right. So Move is where you can move things around. And Control tab, we have a whole lot of conditional statements. So these conditional statements are in an octagon. And I just drag them on, and I'll explain how this works. So this says check grid. And I want to check, is it snapped to a horizontal and vertical grid? And I'll click OK. So what this is saying, if I make it a little bit bigger, if instance is aligned with grid. Instance refers to the object that I'm working with. And if I open it up, there's the grid size. So if it is aligned with the grid, it's going to do the next instruction afterwards. It's always best to put these around it though, because this is saying if it's aligned with the grid, do this stuff in this block. So these little arrows here. And it's much easier to read, especially when you've got several things, because normally it will only do the one right afterwards. But you want to use those blocks and you'll be able to do multiple things. So if this instance is aligned with the grid, then start moving in that direction. I'm going to do the same with the other ones as well. So 32, 32, and put those blocks above and below there. And the same with this one. And put those blocks above and below. And then lastly, unfortunately my mouse has died, So I'm just going to have to go and get a battery, and I won't be able to pause the video because it has died. Alright, we're all good. So down, check if it's aligned with the grid, 32, 32, and pop that in there. Right, so I should be able to run this now. It should be a lot more controllable. So if I push down, I can now kind of anticipate the turn coming up and make that turn. So pretty straightforward, and it works really well. The last thing I want to do is check and make sure that if I'm not pushing any key, keyboard no key, and that was right down the bottom, keyboard no key, just off the screen here, but you'll see it when you push it there. If I'm pushing no key, now I want to make sure, is he aligned to the grid? I don't want him to start or stop in the middle of nowhere. And then put those blocks in. If he's aligned to the grid, I want to stop, go speed 0. So I'll move this. You can see that he'll move one square at a time. So he's not going to stop halfway. You can't actually see him down the bottom there, but I can go all the way up, etc. So that works. Alright, so if you've got that movement down, you can stop there. But if you're interested in how to do it in code, then just hang on, because I'm going to create a duplicate of this, and you can have a go at creating it in code. So best thing to do would be to make a duplicate of it. So like I said, if you're happy with that and understand it, you can stop this video here. But if you want to know how to do it in actual code, so programming it by typing it in instead of dragging and drop, then you can continue on. Now this won't affect your grade, okay? So if you think that you need to do it in code, you do not need to be able to code to do it. But it will help you if you're considering doing it at level 2 and 3, because level 2 and 3, there is proper coding required. So in our new object, test player code, we're just going to delete all of this stuff. So you can just delete, yes, delete, yes, delete. And we're still going to add those events back in, create, except this time we're going to use execute code. So on the control bit, this is the only one we need, execute code. And it brings up this little scripting window. And what we're going to do is, what we wanted it to do when it started is to move snap. Now there's a lot of different commands in here. Each one has a particular corresponding drag and drop. So the one that we were looking at, which I'll just exit out of here, is move this one here, align to grid, and this is its corresponding 32 by 32. So when the program runs, it's going to snap to a 32 by 32 grid. It's going to move the object and snap it to a 32 by 32 grid. That's it for that bit of code. Pretty easy. Now we're not going to actually use any of the keyboard events this time. What we're going to use is a step event instead. And a step event, I'll explain it in more detail when we actually get up to it for drag and drop stuff, but essentially the program will run a certain number of steps per second, roughly 30. So it's kind of like 30 frames per second, and every frame or every step, it's going to run these actions in here. So roughly it's going to do this 30 times a second. You can make it faster, you can make it slower, but 30 is the default. So in here, we're going to have control, and this is what it's going to check 30 times a second. First thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that it doesn't accept any input unless it's snapped to a position. So that's where we use an if statement. And If we try to use move snap, well, that was a function that moved it, but it's not actually checking if it is snapped to a position. So the one to check if it is snapped is place snapped. Then we tell it in brackets the actual grid size. So if place snapped, and what this is asking is if this condition is true. So I can put brackets around it here. If this condition is true, because this is either going to say yes, it is snapped, or no, it's not. So it's either going to be true or false. If it's true, then it's going to do the things inside these little curly braces. I'll just move this up here. I don't think, unfortunately, I can't make this any bigger. This doesn't go any bigger. Hopefully my screen size is fine. So if place snapped, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to check the keyboard things. So if keyboard underscore check, and I've got to type what key I want into brackets. Now there's a few different keys here. Most of them start with VK. So VK is variable key, underscore, we'll do up first, up. So if keyboard check VK up is true, so if that's true, I'll put in some more of these curly braces. Then I'm going to, I think it's set, no, it's motion underscore set, and I need to give it two different attributes, a direction and a speed. So up is 90 degrees. So I need to give that in degrees. I can give it one of 360 degrees, and the speed is going to be 4. Now I can just copy this for the last 4 keyboard things. I'll make that a little bit bigger. Except I'm going to do then right. And right, the direction for right is 0. Then I'll do down. The direction for down is 180 degrees. And actually, sorry, the direction for down is 270 degrees, my mistake. And then up is going to be, sorry, left, last one is left, and that's going to be 180 degrees. So just to go over that, VK up is the first one and its direction is 90. VK right is the second one, its direction is 0. VK down is the third one, its direction is 270. And VK left is the fourth one, its direction is 180. So we've got, starting with the right hand side, the right hand side is 0 degrees, and then we go up to 90 degrees, left to 180, down to 270, and then of course everywhere in between has its own angle, but it's clockwise from the right hand side. So what this is checking, if the place is snapped, and then if that is true, then it will check the keys. If the keyboard VK up, so if I'm pushing up, then we're going to push that there. And let's just see how this works. I'll need to delete this one from the room and put in my test player code. It might not actually work properly to start with. Okay, it does. Whoops. Just keeps going forever. Okay, it does do the proper turning, but it's got no interaction. Now there is a very long way to code this out, but it's not always the best way to do it in GameMaker. So to get it to stop, I'm just going to go add event collision with the wall, and then I'm going to do that. Now I could do this. I could go motion set 0, 0. It doesn't really matter what direction it's facing in this case. But motion set 0, 0, and that'll set it to nothing. So when it hits a wall, goes that way, hits a wall, stops, goes down, hits a wall, stops. The last thing I've got to do is tell it to stop if there's no key. Okay, so in here, I could check, there's no way to actually check VK no key as far as I'm aware. If keyboard underscore check VK underscore, oh yeah, no key, we can do that. Motion set 0, 0. Okay, so if no key is pushed, we're going to set the motion to 0, 0. The direction doesn't really matter. It just needs to be there, so we may as well put it as 0. The speed is what's going to affect it. I'll run this. Now push it, I let go of the key, and it stops. So we've got the exact same movement, but this time with code. So you'll need to save this, and save it somewhere where you won't lose it. So save as, I'm just going to save it into examples. So grid movement. And the next one we're going to look at some platform movement.